end on time, let's start on time. This panel is called Virtual Reality in Search of a New Communication Paradigm Between the Creator and the Environment. This panel will be in English, so those of you who require translation can avail themselves of headsets. The panelists will be Professor Joanna Żylińska, who's with us. She's a professor of media philosophy and critical digital practice at King's College London. She's written 8 books on philosophy, technology, and art. Joanna, do join us.
Zapraszamy.
Joining us online is Hartmut Kennitz, who's Associate Professor at Södertörn University in Sweden, a visiting researcher at the University of Amsterdam, and a visiting research fellow at Trinity College Dublin. Hartmut.
Hello, everybody.
Hi. I zapraszam na scenę kierowników pracowni VR, AR.
And the heads of the VR lab, VN Lab, Paula Borkiewicz and Jacek Magłowski, will be moderating this panel.
Czy możemy poprosić tam prezentację w tym miejscu?
Tak, to teraz.
Żeby też...
O, mamy to. Dobrze. I switch to English. And we would like to present what we've been doing for the last 4 years and why we've been doing that and how we've been doing that. And at the end, we will present some questions that for us are still open and maybe are funding the basis of what we are going to do further on. And having that, just for you to know where we are in the presentation, what to expect, just shortly the agenda. We will start from telling you about what projects have we been doing and we are still doing. Part of it you've probably seen in the exposition here. Then we would like to tell you about our view of where we are generally in terms of cultural changes and social changes and technological changes, because this background and our view on this background really hardly determines the way we've been working with VR. Then these methods and tools will be developed. We developed and we used. We will tell about it more. And then we focus on the main issue and how it was solved that we've been focusing during these 4 years on. And finally, we would like to switch to this subject I mentioned before. So we would like to talk about where it is all coming and what are the next really important and burning issues that we would like to deal with in the future.
So, hello. Our studio is, of course, run by me and Jacek, as we told, and we're both creative producers of several VR experiences that we developed and researched in the studio. And I just also responsible for scientific research program. This is Contact for Us. The studio operates within a framework of the pilot project New Forms and Technologies of Narrations. This is a 4-year project. And the goal or the aim of the program is basically discovering the rules of the external narrative language. So what we've been doing now, we finishing 15th interdisciplinary artistic and research projects. And these projects were selected annually by Artistic Council. Teams that working with us, these are interdisciplinary teams, mainly combined artists and researchers. So artists, I mean, these are a huge group of people dealing with multimedia, theater, literature, poetry, games, sound design, coding, 3D art, UX design, and researchers, mainly from psychology, sociology, and media studies. And in the whole process, we employment of scientific methods to evaluate our results. So we've been doing really multifaceted research. Projects are developed with complete documentation of the workflow and with all these details connecting to technical and production problems and potential solutions. These creative processes are analyzed with the goal of creating a new audiovisual language with all these critical reflections from artists and researchers during this period. The whole project results with recommendations for creators. We mean, of course, case studies, analysis, and scientific publications. And about scientific publications, we working on the digital publication platform, which Film School Publishing House, and we showing the results during the scientific conferences. I hope we will finish on the end of the year this basic publication about XRL language. And what we are doing with our artistic projects is also distributional part. I mean, all experience will circulate or do circulate in the international festival circuits or on distribution platforms, ecosystems. So basically what I would like to sum is that the main goal of artistic and research project was or is still creating recommendations for a new language of immersive narratives.
Okay, and now we can switch to this background. Felix yesterday was telling about this localized point of view, this localized knowledge, and this is pretty great description actually of our approach as well. And so regarding this localized approach, we would like to say how we view processes and trends that are around us right now. And I will split it into three parts. And the most important probably, and the deepest one, is something that might be very controversial at the first glance, but maybe we will agree later on that as well, is that we definitely observe processes that are changing, that are leading to the paradigm shift. Or we are maybe already witnessing the paradigm shift that is right now. And on the social and cultural and political level, it's the...
And climate change also is another level.
It's the erosion of hierarchy that we see on many institutions, but also in the approach of generally people that and that switch is also seen with Me Too movement, which is regarding decline of the patriarchy, which is all linked together, of course. So these are the long-term processes that we can observe for a long time already, and we believe we will observe further on. Then we have the decrease in trust in democratic institutions, but we have it written this way because we believe that this, in general, this decrease in trust in democratic institutions is actually in the sake of democracy itself. Because this decrease in trust is very often because many people, we start to see that it's very often the facade that is democratic, and behind it, it's still very hierarchical and very power-oriented, in fact. What we also observe as a long-term process is the spread of inclusiveness in probably any level we can imagine. And I won't lie that saying that actually regarding all these processes described here, we are, of course, not... it's not all the same for us. I mean, we are into this change, and we evaluate these changes positively. And the first argument against it, of course, can be that, okay, but what we observe right now around us is rather increase of authoritarian and patriarchal tendencies in many countries on the political level, as well as among many people, and support for that kind of tendencies might seem to be very often rising, but actually, we believe that it is kind of a reaction. And the reaction, not in terms of communist reaction, how they called it regarding the capitalism, but it's a reaction that actually, if these trends are there, if these trends are so strong, then those who, for many reasons, positive and negative, sometimes it's power-oriented, sometimes it's safety, these groups of people feel endangered, and if they feel endangered, they also start to be much more aggressive and much more visible. Therefore, at the moment, we believe it seems like it's the rise, but it's the rise that actually is not there for a long time. So it's a short-term, in our opinion, short-term rise. So these are these trends that we believe that we follow, and this is on this political, let's say, level, but it's supported and confluented with technological paradigm shift. And what we observe there is, again, might be controversial, but we believe still it's, in the long term, it's pretty optimistic, is that, okay, we have the term mainstream media, which is pejorative actually already for many people and many groups of people, but actually because of much better access to knowledge and to information, a lot of functioning and a lot of mechanisms in the media were demasked and revealed, and therefore the trust in these old ways of communication has dropped. So the need for transparency is bigger and bigger, and we believe that this is something that is changing and is gonna be changed for better. Also, another thing, we have social network film that made a lot of changes in people's minds regarding that, but it was depicting mainly Facebook, and you can have a distinction between those social networks that are representation oriented, like Facebook, for example, and those social networks that are communication oriented. And what we see in the pandemic and after the pandemic is the rise of really decentralized social networks that are not so powerful actually as these big ones. This is the first thing. And also the rise of communication-oriented social networks in opposition to, we believe, a decline of representation-oriented or presentation-oriented social network, which is, in our opinion, also a pretty good trend, which supports all those issues that we mentioned before. So things that are into inclusivism, into communication, into flattened structures. Then we also observe increased awareness of privacy issues in the society, and it is also observed on the level of companies and corporations.
And the beginning was, for example, the social dilemma to 2020, yeah.
And having that in mind, even these corporations are sometimes, of course, again, another type of washing, but still there is a need to address this issue, which is kind of new, because even a few years ago, talking about privacy was just it was not a mass and general public subject that was discussed. And finally, of course, pandemic-driven acceleration of remote communication tools, the flexibility and collaboration, flexibility in terms of time, flexibility in terms of geography, which of course again has sometimes positive issues, sometimes negative, because it also allows employers to exploit this flexibility, but still, if used properly, it gives a lot of chances. And the third one is these cultural changes. And if I mean cultural, if you mean cultural in here, it means actually the cultural production. So it's pretty narrow view on according to this presentation. And we see the same kind of trends. We see changing towards the bigger and bigger inclusivity, into collaboration, into decentralization, the myth of author or artist with big A, even though sometimes, yesterday we've been talking about, sometimes it holds on pretty well on some environments, but still for the general public and also in many groups in these institutions that are related to cultural production, this tendency towards flattened structure, towards democratization, we believe is bigger and bigger. And a very important thing is, okay, we've been talking for a long time already that the split into high culture and mass culture is something that okay, should go away, but still it was pretty strong even some time ago. But right now we believe that you can really see, I don't know, in music, really artists that are respected in both worlds, that they can play their songs in the radio on one hand, in pop radio, and at the same time they are well seen in the Philharmony by professional musicians and so on. So it's like we can see it already as a spectrum, and using artifacts from mass culture in a very detailed, very elaborated way on one hand, and using tools or using approaches from avant-garde art in many disciplines into mass production, mass culture. It's more and more visible, and it's not divisive anymore. It's not controversial. It's something that is pretty natural for us already. And what we can also observe is that the cultural and scientific development, the awareness of how networked these processes are, how we all are dependent from each other, how the flow of communication and flow of information is required for a true development of ideas, This is also something that is brought to awareness very, very much lately. So these are the general trends that we believe that it goes, and it refers to the way we approach our work in VNLab.
Yes, and those methods and tools applies in our studio in relation to this context. It's for sure flat structure. This is one of the most important thing for us. And in this flat structure, the knowledge transfer is between equals. We don't have tutors or students. We just all the interdisciplinary team. And we have in mind the idea that what we are doing is a kind of representation of complexity. And of course, this implies cross interdisciplinary. And
yeah, like there's no divisions, right? Very often in terms of creative disciplines or creative industries, you got to be part of that already. You have to have a stamp of being, I don't know, filmmaker, theater maker, or any kind of other artist. And for us, it was important that actually, also because it's a completely new discipline that needs this knowledge from many other disciplines, but also because we simply believe that if there is no so much difference between people who create stuff. I mean, if there is some sensitivity that is proved in any other way they are doing stuff, if there is a thought and a message that is to be provided through the work, then the discipline these people come from doesn't really matter so much. It's all about just talking. It's all about communication and what is to be said and so on.
Talking and doing things.
Yeah, talking and doing things. And at the same time, it is also flat in a way that, okay, if you are an author in many institutions, then you can, because you are proved track record as an author, then you are approved to apply, you are approved to get money, to get funding for something, and you are approved to do next stuff. For us, it was like, okay, all these creative people that are working in many different levels of many different industries, they are all creative, they all have something to say. So if they were coming to us with a good project, no matter if it's a programmist, if it's a set designer, if it's a DOP, and so on, not necessarily the author who was stamped as the author, till now, then for us it was like exactly the same, because all these divisions are kind of the pattern of, in our opinion, of the old hierarchy that we do not want to follow anymore.
Yes, and first example is for cross-disciplinary. It's Nights. Nights is a VR experience we've been doing on the very beginning. And this was a prototype period for us as a studio. I mean, and this was only half a year for producing this experience. So this was very short time. And we have two artists or creative person that propose dossier. That was Weronika Lewandowska, the poet, and a dancer, Sandra Lewandowska, with no previous experience in VR production, of course.
And not much in audiovisual production in general as well.
Yes, yes.
But they were creatives. They wanted to tell something, and they wanted to use these means in their opinion. So that was, because of the project, that was really good enough for us to accept it.
Those two directors created a multidisciplinary, a multisensory piece, and they premiere at Sundance Film Festival last year. So, in our opinion, it was really a huge success for these pieces.
Also, the next one is that we would like to mention here as example is Cave. Again, example of multidisciplinary team, people who are philosophers and who had an idea for a great project came to the selection committee, provided this project, and we all thought that yes, it is great, we want to do it.
And next one is the Discount. This is a collaboration between journalists and narratologists, working with psychologists and therapists. So it's also a kind of cross-disciplinary idea.
Then we have That City, and we have Self. And what is very important to mention there is how it was developed. Guys, Krzysiek Grudziński, who is here with us, I believe. Yes, he is there. And Patryk Jordanowicz, they started from some idea, but actually we believe that this process of making it together with others in the discussion, together with really group discussions on the projects, they really started to look for their own voice in these experiences, which resulted in complete change of the experience from beginning till the end, with a really big breakthrough in these experiences, and definitely it was a breakthrough for good.
Tools. Our toolset was basically the main document was the structure, and the structures. For the very beginning, it was on a kind of Excel. When we have the layers, for example, for participants, emotions, for okay, sorry. Maybe it's a dead end to go there, but I would like to say that this tool allows authors to see the conflict, because the main idea is to see the points that could be a possible fail. So in this structure, they can see the conflict between linear storytelling and the need for participants' agency or interactivity. And for example, Control Negative, Dead City, Pilot, and Nights was this kinds of projects for us, in our opinion, that deals with structures and go further because of this toolset.
And the other tool was Script and Pitch Deck, and it might seem that these are kind of promotional tools regarding Pitch Deck mainly, but actually it's just another way for structuring thought about the project, for making it shortened, and it helped a lot we know that from the authors for Control Negative, Discount, and Multiverse, to really clear out what this project is about, how they want to tell what is going to be told.
Also contextualize story about it, because it's a very important part for us to make a context on the beginning. So when we are on the development period, we ask our creators how you will show it, what in what ecosystem, what kind of context you will deal with.
And regarding tools, also it was very strong on the first year when we didn't have the pandemic. Then once we were on the online version, it was not so strong, unfortunately. But we definitely saw that this method of working together on issues, of meeting for 2 or 3 days and talking about each project, we felt it very, very powerful. Very rapid development of projects was happening then. And but for this to happen, there were some qualities of people who were there. And actually, these qualities were also something we were looking for when we were choosing project. We wanted to have people who are open. We wanted people who are able to share their knowledge, and definitely much more to help than compete. And I believe that we had very talented people in the course of
And in the
of that.
selection process, we focus not only on the dossier, but also on the person, on the team, how they collaborate. If are they friends or something like that? What kind of approach they imply?
And as you see, it is all related to this issue that we mentioned at the beginning, that we believe these values that should be implied. And I believe that it worked. That it worked in the context of our studio very well. And this is what we said, that that was this year, but that was also the how cohesive is the team, and how open for discussion, and how open for helping others as well to achieve their goals.
And the next one is value of scientific research, because we've been doing a Whispers deep dive and Nights study. I mean the whole process, but I will talk about it in the next panel. But in doing this scientific research, we working with directors, and after the data analyzing, we come back to those people and just have a conversation about this effects. So we think that, for example, for deep dive, if it was a kind of verification of initial suppositions regarding artistic tools used for immersive storytelling. And in case of Whispers, it's connected with Jacek because Whispers is Jacek's and Patrick's experience. It was, maybe you can say, yeah.
It was actually kind of oblivion that with Whispers we are talking much more to the same people as us, not exactly to the wide public, which was quite strange, but it was seen definitely on the results of the research. And
yeah, the context about exhibition and installation that I mentioned before is that a VR as separate piece. It's something that is not longer, how to say.
Yeah, it's not separated. It's not in the goggles anymore.
Okay.
It is something that you have to take. You have to be aware of the context it is presented. So the context has to be also created, and that's why we moved into this polysensory experience. That's why we moved into set design that is required to create for many experiences. So this blend between virtual and real has to be provided.
Yeah, so we do the scenography set, and for Nights, it was for the premiere last year. Yeah, go on.
And now focusing on this main, we are almost out of time, so I will be short right now. Focusing on this main issue that we've been dealing with is the creator-spectator's relationship. And first, on the head, you see the spectator, but later on, we have to use the term participant. It's all about participation, and therefore it is very participant-centric communication that requires from creator the focus on the state of mind, of feelings, of sensuality of the person that is receiving that. And having that in mind is crucial when constructing and making the VR experience, which again is very flattening structure. You never, in VR, there is no place for, providing a message and for the recipient. It's all about much flattened communication. And also, it's pretty important that the participant is considered to be a subject themselves. Because
with their own body.
yeah, because it's much more about communication paradigm in terms of when you create something than the expression paradigm. So it's all about being equals again when you're creating VR experiences than when you try to talk with the person who is the participant of VR experience. And very important is the distinction that we realized in the meantime, that there is a huge difference. If we want to communicate, it's about conversation, as we said, but there is a difference between the conversation and simulation. If this is, of course, you have this interactivity issue that because the first thing was about storytelling, how you treat the participant, so that it is required to treat that. But in this second part of that is the interactivity, and that is very often in conflict with storytelling. And if we have that conflict, there is a doubt, there is a possibility that you go full on the interaction level. But what you create then is rather the simulation than something that is authors-driven, that is a communication. So participation in the message is very important. Co-creation of the message, of the meaning is very important. And something that is very important also is to avoid creating a sandbox, because in the sandbox, the meaning is very hard to convey. And there is ethical component in that as well, because if we agree that creation is mainly, as well as any kind of thinking actually, is mainly the selection and structurization of some phenomena that we want, that we form a message from, then also pretending that the artist is absent, to paraphrase the famous title, is actually simply avoiding the responsibility for the co-created message. The artist is always present. The artist forms the message, and the artist invites, the creator invites someone into the discussion. He cannot hide into behind the work that is done. And again, about localization, it has to be revealed, his localization, where he speaks from, to really understand it, to really try to communicate. So again, the same values we mentioned at the beginning are also visible in the process of thinking about the creative work. And also, just really briefly, regarding the strategies that we've developed in this creator-participant relation, that is, again, pretty new and difficult, that we have to find. And we have examples of that. So we have the whole spectrum of strategies, and we have the demasking of illusion of presence, that is in Wish You Were Here, that Michał Stankiewicz really shows how presence, that is very keyword in VR, is actually completely illusory, and do it in a pretty strong way. Then we have taking the approach from the strong storytelling, which is Krzysiek Grudziński example in the city. Then in pilot we have really juxtaposition of these two modes, interactive mode and storytelling mode. And the way it's done is that they put light one on another. It's like the interactive part really makes you understand better the narrative part. And the narrative part really provides the background to understand and to be in this interactive part. Then in control negative, we have the really great blend of these two modes, where all the interactivity is blended into the storytelling, where we are still in the head of the person who tells us the message, and who asks us in a very, very personal story, and who asks us to do stuff. But it's at this point, it's not kind of task related, or even if it's task, it is pretty clear what is the purpose for the story of these tasks. And then we have multiverse, which is like a big convolution of multiple storylines. But still, even if we have multiple storylines that are convoluted and going in time this way and that way and so on, it's still in time very structured dramaturgically. So even though you can follow many different lines, the dramaturgy of it all is still kept, no matter what. Okay, I will skip this one because we don't have time for that, but what is very important for our discussions right now is setting the ground for the further development of that. So what we've been dealing with is metaphorically that relation between creator and the participant of VR experience. But right now, with this shifted paradigm of creation that we've been mentioning, we believe that this approach, this inclusivity, flattened structure, and so on, has to be spread into other kinds of relation that are visible in the process of creation. So we believe it has to be dialogic rather than authoritative communication. We believe that it has to be co-creation with also non-human agents or non-human entities. And what is required to be changed, and another issue is this is what we want to discuss, how to change it, that we shouldn't, especially with the rise of AI, we shouldn't treat it as a tool anymore. It is a partner, and how to change that aspect, how to change that process, how to incorporate and include all the other elements in the creative process into the process of creation. These are the issues that we want to focus on in our discussion. I will leave maybe these questions open here. We have and now we can discuss this, how it goes, how can we implement these new strategies towards inclusiveness into the process of making stuff. Okay. Tak?
Na streamie po prostu bardzo słychać szum z danego balkonu, więc tryb samolotowy Wi-Fi będzie ok.
Dobra, okej. Okay. Do you have a... 1, 2, 1, 2. Are we all here? Yeah, we are. We don't
see Hartmut, yes.
Yeah, we don't see Hartmut, but we will hear you, Hartmut, and we will look at you from this strange angle. But we'll try.
Oh, there he is.
Ah, hello. Okay, so maybe the first question to both of you is, it's gonna be very straightforward. How do you feel about these approaches? Do you feel that this inclusiveness on one hand and this is really the process that happens now, and are you optimistic regarding that? And if so, yeah, what are these tendencies in your opinion?
Okay, can I have a go? Well, first of all, thank you for such a fascinating overview of the practices of your lab. And also, I've really enjoyed being able to see some of the works today. Yesterday, in the different studios. And I'm absolutely on board with your program of what I see as moving beyond the kind of old-style paternalistic way of teaching kind of filmmaking and teaching creative subjects, where there was the kind of old-style auteur, usually that was a he who stood in his posture, intellectual and creative, and had to, put some kind of fear and horror into the followers, who were usually followers. So there is a great generosity, I think, in your approach, and that approach of creating a different environment. I think there is something very ethical about this. So I think that's totally amazing. At the same time, I recognize the number of tensions in your articulation of this, which I'm sure you're aware of, because you are saying the artist is not present. Mm-hmm. The artist still retains their role of an artist, and it might be more of an entangled artist. They might exist in a conversation or a collaboration with others, but there is at the same time a taking of responsibility. And I'd like to kind of, as part of our conversation, to take that question back to you. If you don't want to be this kind of, macho lab owner, filmmaker of a particular stature and behavior and posture, which, as we know, what's happening in art schools across the world now in Europe around practices of violence, which is not just physical but emotional, affective. So if you clearly, I understand, want to avoid some of that and create different affects as part of your practices. So how do you understand your role in all of that? Because clearly you are not just letting it all happen. There is also a way of taking responsibility on your part. I mean, are you kind of like lab whisperers? Are you like, ghosts in the background? How would you articulate your own ownership of that project? And is ownership even a good word?
Yeah, I think it depends on the period. On the very beginning, when we develop the projects, it's mostly our knowledge transfer, and we have some...
It's not even the transfer, it's sharing.
Sharing, mm-hmm. Yes. And we have some discussion and seminars about the specific topics of VR. And during this, we just meet those people, and we mostly discuss and showing things. Mm-hmm. And this part is quite structurized because we are dealing with this from a few years, and we have some toolset, as we said, that for the very beginning we start with this narrative paradox part, and with the structure, with how to structurize the pitch deck, and how to build a context, and we work with all those people. But this is mostly a kind of showing things and talking about that in a kind of dialogue way.
Okay. Yes. Can I just have a quick follow-up to this? Then what about expertise? Is expertise important to you both as part of the work? And how do you account for expertise? How do you create room for it without, again, working with those kind of hierarchies that you want to do away with?
Actually, I do believe that expertise is the word that we are trying to really avoid in our practice, especially this is the field that is really developing right now, and we really believe there is no experts. Of course, for now, after doing all that stuff, after doing stuff that was before, we have more experience that we can share. But actually nothing is set in stone, and it was proved many, many times that people from different approaches, like I'm from film, my background is in film, but people from different approaches have much better intuitions and much better understanding of some concept of VR than, for example, I can have.
Yes, but that's truly expertise as well, even though I understand that the connotations of the term expertise with the expert who stands above the crowd might not be to your liking, and I'm completely okay with that. But there is clearly a recognition of, as you said, knowledge and understanding coming from others. So it's a space in which different people bring
and we are equal
different
in that
ways.
because we all discussing that. We are all, we all understand what brings value to that and what eventually doesn't. And it is also pretty common that we agree or disagree on some issues. So
that's
it's
great.
pretty doable.
But because this is a medium of space, we are dealing with, for example, architects, and their knowledge about the space, it's broader than in the film field. So it's obvious that their expertise is something that we are looking for in this development part.
If you don't mind, I would be happy to ask Hartmut.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Are you with us, Hartmut? Yeah, you are.
Yes, I very much feel like I'm very present, like sort of even omnipresent. I feel when I look at the screen. Yeah, I mean, first of all, I want to congratulate you on this, amazing program that you have completed and all the projects that you have undertaken during this time. So this is really amazing work. Thank you. And also thank you for giving this really extensive overview of, some of the, let's say, artistic, political and cultural developments that we are all dealing with. Things like, I know you mentioned the flat hierarchies or the erosion of hierarchies. You mentioned sort of hopefully the end of the erosion of patriarchal structures, at the same time the attacks on democracies and sort of the resurgence, it seems, of authoritarianism in many areas. I don't think I need to especially mention what is going on, in the country that borders Poland to the south. I think we are all very aware of what is going on there. And maybe, if the audience does not necessarily know who I am, I mean, one of the stakes I have in that, and I'm showing a quick slide here, I am the chair of the Cost Action INCOR. That is a European network currently encompassing about 180 researchers. And we're working on the topic of interactive narrative design for complexity representation. Paula is also a member of the network. This is, from our last meeting. And here we're really looking how we can use more current forms of narration here, especially interactive narratives, to represent complex topics such as global warming, the migration crisis, COVID, and so far and so on. So I think, of course, I think these projects are complementary in many ways. One thing we want to accomplish with the project is to create a more broader use of interactive digital narratives to represent complex topics, and of course that can include VR, but also journalistic projects, interactive documentaries, and in some cases games. I'm deeply convinced that these forms give us new opportunities to really show the complex world, and I'm very happy to saw that also repeated in some of your slides in terms of the representations of complexity. I think this is really one of the challenges, that we also have become aware that we really live in a post-modern time, and there's no longer this one true grand narrative that can help us explain everything. So I think this is also a shared general backdrop here.
Okay.
I think we still need to do a whole lot more from my perspective to sort of what I see as understanding what narrative can be. in this regard. And I think narrative can be a whole lot more than what we are used to in terms of being malleable, giving and some voice here, and that is also something that you talked about, change relationship between creator and participant. And in this regard, I'd like to remind us that this is actually not such not such a new perspective. That has been sort of in the discussion for quite some time, and I mean it shows how difficult that is also as a challenge for creators to sort of give up some of the basically the power they're used to in terms of getting their particular view on.
Okay.
So,
Hartmut, we barely hear you at the moment, unfortunately.
Sometimes my computer is not collaborating when it should do. But I mean, one thing to show is sort of very quickly this one. And you should hopefully see it in. No, that is, you're not seeing. Yes, are you seeing it now?
We see the presentation, yes.
Yeah, we see
Oh,
slides.
And we
sorry.
start to hear you better also.
Can you hear me again now?
Yeah,
Yes.
better.
Can you see the slide?
Yes,
Yes.
we can.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, we can. No, we can't.
I'm not sure if you're hearing me.
Okay, maybe the connection.
Can you
will
hear
be-
me now?
Not really.
Okay, sorry. What I was saying was basically, I mean, it's very interesting that you touched on the question of a relationship between creator and participants. And I just wanted to say that, this is actually something we're dealing with for a while.
I haven't heard. Okay.
Can you hear me again or not?
Hartmut, maybe if you could turn off the camera, maybe the connection will be better because it's very important for us what you are saying.
See when I can hear you.
Okay. Could you try to say something? It didn't help. Okay. I hope it will be better in time later on.
Okay.
Okay.
Is it better now?
Looks like.
Yes. Hello.
Okay. So if you could repeat your last sentences, please, because it was barely hearable.
Okay. Can you hear me or not?
We can.
Yes, now
But
we
there's a
can.
huge delay, I
So
suppose.
what I said. Okay. Strangely enough, I don't see, okay. So what I said, it's very interesting that you were mentioning the relationship or the changed relationship between creator and participant. Mm-hmm. And the slide I showed, I hope did you see the slide that I shared?
Not at the moment, we've seen that before.
Okay, right. But the slide is something that Roy Ascott said already in 1968, and I think it's interesting that we are sort of still, dealing with this particular shift in sort of power and in how we perceive an artwork. I'm trying to share it again here now. So I mean, this is sort of a conception of cybernetic art as described by Roy Ascott in 1968. So this is certainly a shift and an interesting shift, and I think this is a very productive tension also. I sometimes say, I mean, it's interactivity is a question that needs to be addressed for every particular project. And sometimes interactivity might not be the right thing, but I think if we want interactivity and also the chances that it brings for audience expression, for audience performance, then we need to be willing to give up some control. And that is still a hard call to make for many artists here.
Yeah. No?
Yes, thank you. So I wanted to kind of take some of these ideas a little further, building on your question and your desire to construct a new language for immersive narratives and thinking, what can we do, which way we can go. And I wanted to put a few ideas on the table, but also maybe to play the devil's advocate. So, and to raise the question of the context as well. And as part of that discussion, in which we have so far been considering human participants, and on the one hand, we flattened the structure, and the lab is this kind of sequence of co-collaborators, that things are emerging. We've given up of the experts and the expertise. We've got a much more dynamic, ethical space. And I want to kind of recognize the role of technology in all of that. And obviously your questions in which you were pointing to AI and non-human influences was already creating an opening for that discussion. So I wanted to ask about the role of this particular technology, especially of virtual reality, that which, and the goggle technology and the spaces that are created as part of the design that are creating a certain set of experiences, and how this, on the one hand, determines, or does it determine, but let's say determines the relationship between the participants and the authors or the creators. On the other hand, how it creates or certain openings as well, ways of experiencing things ourselves differently as technological beings. I'm going here with the aforementioned Flusser and Bernhard Stiegler, for whom we are always technical beings. We have emerged as humans in the world through technology, starting from fire and stones through to devices such as computers, microphones, and goggles. So as part of that context, I'm thinking about this idea of the empathy machine. We've all heard the saying, Chris Milk, the very unfortunate phrase that VR as empathy machine. We will all watch experiences of, I think he was giving the example of Syrian refugees, and then because you're so close and you're so surrounded by it, you will have a certain enhanced sensibility. And I think lots of creators kind of went and tried to do that, thinking, well, we are creating some of these experiences through poetry, through a kind of barrage of images, and you can see some of these gestures, even if people might not be in direct conversation or debate with Milk, is not happening in some of the projects here. But on the other hand, there is something else happening with the technology, which is that the concept I've been working is the concept of the perception machine. And it's the concept which for me already has this kind of, is more ambiguous. So on the one hand, it recognizes a certain fascination with the technology of VR and extended reality and all the other kind of software parts that come into it, as well as the kind of human-machine collaborations. On the other hand, it also recognizes the political and economic context of the question of who owns the platform, who owns the tech, what kind of gestures are being predetermined again. So you can do everything you want to do as long as you're using the set of gestures that has been predefined. And as long as you think you are creating a certain form of art and experience and encounter, but at the end of the day, you are creating data points for a kind of bigger behemoth, which is that perception machine owned by, be it by Meta. I still can't bring myself to calling it Meta. I mean, the artist, the con artist, previously known as Facebook. So that kind of sense of the perception machine, which also generates a certain individualized experience in which we're all starting to live in an image envelope. So part of me, and I'm saying as somebody who both writes about images and creates images, so clearly loves images or is interested in images, I'm also concerned about that kind of increased experience of living in an image envelope. And the fact that you can say that there is a certain digital circle of steel enclosing upon us, and it can be sometimes dressed up as a kind of art project, as a nice experience, but there is perhaps something kind of more pernicious going on, in the sense that our perception is being colonized. And it's being, on the one hand, personalized and individualized, on the other hand, is being platformized and colonized. And I'm kind of concerned about that. And this is the context that's part of my devil's advocate questioning that I'm trying to raise to you. So this new language, you know, how does it operate within that context of the perception machine, which, as we probably know, isn't so much an empathy machine. Although, now and again, it can create, you know, all sorts of affects, empathy, short-lived as it might be, being perhaps one of them.
Maybe on the very beginning we could say something about the new pipeline with co-creation with AI that we are dealing with. But yeah, before that, what?
Even before that, it's you mentioned Flusser, and actually, it's also with any tools, it's also about hacking, and we do it very often in here, and authors are doing that, and like the first example is Wish You Were Here, which is actually about showing how presence is kind of a fake that is provided by it's an illusion that is provided by VR, and I believe that in many cases, from technical to meritorical, it's about finding these inconsistencies that you can put your your message through this. But I would also direct your question to Hartmut before that, because it is also about a question about complexity and complex systems and how to find your own way and how to deal with these complex systems like perception machines or theoretically empathy machines like that. Hartmut, how would you tell about these relations?
That's a very interesting question. I mean, I think, you know, we should use technology as well as we can. And that clearly means we also need to be realistic and we cannot be naive. And I tend to see this idea of the empathy machine as inherently naive and technologically deterministic in a way which is uncritical.
Yeah, I think we've agreed on that. That was already kind of established.
Yes, yeah, we are dealing with that, talking about we need to structuralize the idea. So I think we put this. There's no voice. Sorry, we can't
right.
hear
I mean,
you.
when we talk about, you know, representations of complexity, I think, you know, the very first thing to...
It won't work. Yeah. This way.
I mean, the strange thing is I don't see any delay on my side, so I'm not sure what's going on.
There is a huge delay, and we have breaks also in what you say. But okay.
If he tries without video again.
Could you try without video once again, because it was much better when the audio was like okay when the video was not in. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I will.
No.
Okay. All right. Okay. The strange thing is I don't see the delay on my side. All right. Yeah, I mean, I think when it comes to representations of complexity, I mean, we really need to understand what we want our participants to get from that, and not to convey a ready-made fixed narrative to them, but give them an experience where they can explore and learn and investigate for themselves. And I think this is really the challenge, because we're so used from an artistic perspective to create finished, fixed products. And now we have this challenge of creating something that is open for exploration and that is exploring cybernetic, computational ways for letting people making their own connections. And you know, this is an ongoing project, of course. But I mean, basically what we want to achieve is not, oh, I get this message. What we, in my mind, want to achieve is, oh, I understand the dynamism of this system. I understand the different connections here.
Yeah, just a quick kind of comeback, because on the one hand, you know, thinking about dealing with complexity, and there's obviously...
Did you all understand that? Was that okay in terms of audio?
Yes, we've heard that.
Yeah. So there is more awareness, I think, of these kind of hyper objects that, you know, Timothy Morton described them as, be it, you know, climate change or kind of totalitarianism or some other objects that we can't see or we're capable of imagining, even though we can't grasp them with a single image or concept. So on the other hand, that sense of the lack of, you know, the art object not being finished is also clearly a historical kind of tendency. It's like, in a way, you can argue that a book is never finished, and as an artifact, as an object that requires a participation of a reader, and it always goes through a number of iterations. So any form of kind of cultural production, of course, it's got its own affordances, its own ways of being in the world, but in itself, if we are going through, you know, thinking here about Umberto Eco or Roland Barthes' reading of the book, the novel, the piece of kind of literary criticism, piece of philosophy, it is always already reiterated in every act of reading, and it goes somewhere different. And that also kind of goes to the question of language, which is always a kind of living being. There is something non-human about language in itself, that, and be it that language being visual or you know, grammatological, that always has all these kinds of lives and openings, and it never belongs to one or to one community, to one individual. But also going back quickly to Flusser, and that idea of how we can actually do something within a system that is determined. And obviously Flusser is talking about the universe, which is on its way to entropy. So even though, you know, you might not be okay with determinism, but presumably most people are okay with physics, as in, you know, we're not undermining gravity here, although, you know, might. So in that sense, when we're talking about the system being deterministic, in that sense, because it's on the way to entropy, and we know our sun will go out in, you know, still we've got some time left. But there are those kind of historical trajectories of different lengths, then Flusser still recognizes that horizon on finitude, and then horizon of technological determination, if you like, and yet he still injects a certain dose, even if not optimism, then you can call it a desire to still do something. And for me, Flusser is one of the most interesting philosophers in that respect, because he takes the technological setup of the universe seriously, as well as own expiration date, and yet he still asks questions about what can we do, rather than just wail and think that there is no way to go. And that idea of the margin of possibility, or a little margin of freedom, which is a term, you know, not just a humanist term, it's also a cybernetic term, to me is very appealing. And I think that describes the works and that search within those kinds of processes, including that kind of VR.
Flusser was our main...
Yeah, it was one of the biggest inspirations of, also for us. But the thing is that, okay, we are slowly shifting into the questions that we tried to pose at the beginning, which is the relation between the creator and the environment. And what we've said till now is, okay, there are these hyper objects that have its power, its huge power over us, but it is still very anthropocentric perspective that we have, and even using Flusser to that, it is about looking for breaks in that image, in that huge, powerful objects that we have to deal with. Actually, no matter if it's just a camera or if it's a social network that is this perception machine that we are actually exploited kind of by. But then there is a question if on many different levels can we maybe start to look for the same kind of flattened, inclusive understanding of otherness and acceptation of otherness towards these different entities that we live with. Is this approach possible? Is this approach not only possible, but does it make sense actually, or is it very like something that's endangering us?
I mean, I think to me it makes total sense, and in that sense, the technology of VR, which finds itself in this weird moment now, because even now here, which most people would be experts, sorry, I know we're not using this term, but people kind of have seen tech before. So, and yet a lot of the discussion are still, is it working, is it not? You need to stop, you need to press. No, let me just reset this. So there is still that sense of defamiliarization and the awkwardness around technology. For me, that glitchiness is always quite fascinating, that we have to have this meta conversation about the tech, as well as do fascinating things in the tech. It's not yet seamless. It's not that we are not yet in that. So that moment of the recognition of the lack of seamlessness of technology and the glitchiness of that kind of setup, as well as recognizing our own human glitchiness, which is something I find fascinating about humans being quite glitchy beings. I think is that moment, maybe the last moment, where that technology can still give us something, because it hasn't yet been precisely marketized, perfected, that it becomes like this 360 image envelope. So when we are in that kind of, surround with all these openings, glitches, stuttering of the machine, we can maybe see kind of different ways of doing things with this and to it. And we're also recognizing that obviously we're not fully in control of the world. So that's a kind of one way. It's a banal statement, of course, we are not fully in control of the world, but it's a way of dealing with that complexity on a certain experiential level. So a lot of people mentally might recognize, of course, the world is complex, but to really live through that as an experience and to understand that I am not the center of the world, I'm not, the world doesn't revolve around me, and not just me as Joanna, but any other human or even humanity as such, even though we seem to have forgotten about this. So return to planetarity, to problems of climate. And that, I think, VR experience could almost become this kind of friendly alien, a reminder of the remainder, if you like, a reminder of the glitch of the universe. And maybe that would be that moment where artists, creators, creatives, flat labs can kind of capture and create those experiences while there is still time, while the tech is not still quite there, if you like.
We should already finish, but please let me prolong it just a bit, because I would be also very happy if Hartmut, from your perspective, if you could say how that relationships, in your opinion, with different non-human objects and non-human entities that we are dealing, can be dealt with.
Right. How is the delay now?
Seems like okay.
Can you hear me right now?
Yes.
All right. Good. Yeah, I mean, I think this is a very interesting question, and again, one that also was already brought up by people in the 1960s in terms of cybernetics being in relationship to cybernetic machines that we now mostly see as computational machines. I think we already dealing in many ways with these sort of interesting hybrid man-computer, person-computer systems all around us. I think that is quite clear. And I think artists can really help to explore this relationship. I think what is important here, I think we want to have democracies around us. We want to have, participation. And I think then we need to really think of how do we want to organize them? How do we want to structure them? And we talked about flat hierarchies, and these flat hierarchies we talked about as a positive thing mostly. But flat hierarchies also means the absence of gatekeepers. And we see that very much, I think, in politics, what it means to have an absence of gatekeepers and have extremist opinions on conspiracy theories very easily, take over, considerable parts of the population. So that is a sort of a downside of flat hierarchies. And I think in this regard, we should really consider this relationship also as one where we can explore organizational and structural ways how to deal with these systems, because that's how we will need to reorganize our democracies.
Okay. Now there's the question to Anya, because we are over time now, but I don't know if we have time for some questions from the public, or yes? Okay, perfect. So, do anyone wants to ask a question? Mostly to our guest, probably. Not really.
I would have one. I really enjoyed your idea that through VR we can make somehow contact. Thank you. I really enjoy your the idea that through VR we can somehow create a tool to imagine sustainable way to live as a humans and expand our focus in single humans and humanity as. So I would really enjoy if you could go further and somehow imagine how we could do that. Thank you.
But this is the question that is directed to...
I mean, everybody who has that idea.
Okay, so projects that we are actually doing right now, so just to briefly start, is inviting systems as co-creators. And we are, of course, we are speaking about AIs right now, but it is really not using systems of AI systems as tools, but for example, in my case, it's making interviews and treating it as a documentary material later on. Of course, there is still authorship in it at the end, but exactly like with any documentary material, but it's also giving a voice and treating these entities as subjective, even though we don't know, or probably many people doubt if there might be subjective. And in this case, if we will find a mode of communication with these non-human systems, and if we will start to convince people that, okay, maybe it's worth, or maybe it's even required from many different point of views, to start to treat some of the systems, some of these entities, as if they could be our partners, and as that we have to deal with, and from the, I don't know, ethical, moral point of view, but also very pragmatic one, then maybe it can be also further extended on any other object, because we have to start first from those that we can communicate in a way we can understand.
And I'll use your question as a kind of plug so come and see the talk and the film I'm showing tonight at 5:30. So I'm going to talk about non-human creativity, and I'm going to show a short film which I made together with different AI engines. And the talk is going to be a bit of an experiment arising out of my kind of longer-term philosophical practice and art practice as an attempt to try and shift that kind of human to human way of working. It's still, as part of my kind of broader philosophical trajectory, I inscribe what I do into the line of thinking that could be described as return to the human after the post-humanist critique. That doesn't mean it's a return to humanism. I think that kind of model has been compromised. It's more a recognition that you can't just give up on the human, because that in itself is a humanist gesture, and it's bound to fail. But I'm taking post-humanist critique, especially under the umbrella of critical post-humanism, starting from, philosophy of 1960s, then going through people like Derrida, through to likes of Donna Haraway, Rosie Braidotti, and others. And after that, how can we think the human, taking all that other scholarship and creative practice seriously? So I'll try and show you what I mean by this later on. So do come.
Yeah, we invite you all who got interested in that, into this presentation and screening.
The wrap-up from Hartmut, is there any? Dear Hartmut, are you with us?
Yes. Are you with me?
Yes.
I can hear and see you fine. Yes, I think, this is such an expansive discussion in terms of a new relationship with this, hybrid systems, basically with non-human systems, but also I think with all the developments that we talked about in terms of political developments and otherwise, that this will keep us busy for quite a while. But I think we should really see VR and similar technologies as tools for exploration of this relationship, and also as important, I have once called it sandboxes for trying out things before sometimes even before they become pertinent in society, some sort of early warning function. And I think we really need to use the tools as artists that way and really look into into these developments and what we can do about that, and how we can sort of reorganize our understanding as subjects by ourselves, but also as societies in the future. And I think this is really what we should focus on.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other question from the audience?
I can just add something to this discussion. We can not think only linear and about structure. Maybe idea of palimpsest would be better to describe the layers which are not sharp between objects and subjects. When we think about relations in the cultural meaning and technical meaning, between person and the world around. That's all.
Thank you very much.
I agree. It's a great point. Thank you.
Okay, so I think that also regarding time, yeah, we should have some break. Thank you very much for this discussion. Thank you for your presence and for being here and talking to us. And yeah, and see you at. Okay, at 3:30 we can be here on the next panel.
Thank you.
Thank you.